Such scholarly examinations began to put flesh and blood on low-income black women. Moreover, low-income black women's experiences, which reveal the human toll of urban living and connect race, gender, class, residence, place, and politics, complicate, if not overturn, the dominant depictions of post-war cities as veritable urban wastelands. By paying particular attention to the material conditions, the seemingly mundane worries of life, and urban policies that often provided the exigencies for local and national struggles in post-war America, scholars of low-income black women reconsider, even reimagine the prevailing narratives of black freedom struggles, which have tended to focus on traditional organizations and the more familiar activists linked to them. So one story I'll share with you in part one emerges out of the specific spatial context of public housing in Durham, North Carolina. But similar stories abound in cities including Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, Nashville, St. Louis, and Los Angeles, and a whole bunch of other cities I don't name. I might not even know the stories yet, but they're out there. This story provides a pathway for exposing the hegemonic historiographical boundaries as well as the political limitations of quote-unquote traditional civil rights struggles and the often decisive power of urban histories or urban issues, in increasingly black-occupied cities to shape citizens' demands for democratic inclusion. On November 11, 1964, George Thorpe, a black divorced mother of three, moved into McDougal Terrace, a racially segregated public housing complex in Durham, North Carolina. A homeowner, one-time married, divorced mother, beauty school graduate, and college student, Thorpe experienced a significant decline in economic security when she divorced. Many women in cities across the nation found themselves in similar harrowing situations that thrust them into not only poverty, but also social positions of disrepute and disgust, particularly because they proactively turned to quote-unquote suspect social welfare programs to abate their and their families' suffering. On August 10, 1965, tenants elected Thorpe president of the complex's Mothers Club. She encouraged them to organize, and as their leader, asked Durham Housing Authority officials for meeting space so the tenants could plan a child care center. Across the country, female public housing tenants had formed such groups to promote sociability, share information, pool resources, and develop mechanisms to address the harsh circumstances, ineffective resources, and government irresponsiveness that accompany being poor in urban America. Of course, such demands were often rendered as unworthy types on the public dole seeking more handouts. So one day after her election, Thorpe received an eviction notice. Fearing that she and her three children would have nowhere to live, Thorpe refused to leave. When the Durham County Sheriff came to put her out, Thorpe locked herself in her apartment and threatened him with deadly bodily harm. She threatened to blow his brains out. Like in Thorpe's case, many low-income black women's political battles and citizens did not stem simply from the legal prescriptions of civil rights, which often frames historical narratives of black freedom struggles, whether we are discussing national organizations or local battles. Nor did the passage of civil rights legislation mitigate the ordinary and frequent problems related to housing, income, or health and child care, or necessarily even protect them from the whims of government power brokers, who, as in the Thorpe case, were their landlords. Facing her family's unexplained expulsion from government housing and potential homelessness, Thorpe filed suit and protested what she deemed a spurious, penalizing, anti-democratic action by housing officials. Thorpe's physical protests and legal battle is just one example among many that reveal what Tim Kaplan has identified as an invisible revolution in which women globally have asserted collective rights, made broad claims about human needs, and, quote, linked social needs to democracy. Confronting the exclusions brought by federal urban policies and local government programs and agencies, poor black women like Thorpe vigorously proclaimed that their poverty did not trump their rights as citizens and as human beings deserving of help, equality, and dignity. Such narratives help to elucidate the concrete manifestations, as well as the limitations, of black freedom struggles in post-World War II cities. Such narratives force a reckoning with low-income black women's incomplete and freighted historical depiction in, if not their utter absence from, prior historical scholarship on black freedom struggles, and exposes, quote unquote, the secondary marginalization, end quote, that they suffered and still experience within black America and at the hands of scholars as a result of their stigmatized positions. Part 2, black women, unlikely actors in black power. In the 1960s, numerous black women, including public housing tenants, welfare mothers, and nuns, mobilized outside of, but in the context of, black power radicals. These women protested racism in a discriminatory state and an economic system that kept people impoverished. They called, oh, it's still up there, good. Okay, they called for black pride and demanded power, social rights, and their dignity, denied their communities, their families, and themselves as black women, mothers, and often their families' primary financial providers. Yet because these grassroots black women, many of them low income, neither jived with the popular and simplistic media cultivated image of armed black men, nor joined nationally known groups, their activism has remained relatively invisible within narratives of black power. An examination of their articulated motivations and practices not only provides a picture of 1960s struggles that often defy clear-cut categorizations, but also expands historical understanding of black power politics. For quite often, black women's activism, while central to the sustenance of many grassroots efforts and organizations, has failed to be recognized, not just by scholars, but also by the very people in the neighborhoods and cities where they waged their struggles. The demands that many low-income black women made at the grassroots reflected the desire for self-determination, which they felt could only be achieved if they had the basic material necessities for living, such as shelter, safety, health, food, and income. Issues, I must say, that the Black Panther Party's 10-point platform included as they assessed the needs of black inner-city residents. For instance, the right to fit shelter for human beings and the demand for, quote, land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace, end quote. One of the women I interviewed, Peggy McCarty, was the first chair of Baltimore's Welfare Rights Group. Mother Rescue was from Park. Not a traditional black freedom organization. Nevertheless, McCarty argued that both the modern civil rights and black power movements influenced her politics. She said, I mean, you begin to feel like you are a part of something big now, McCarty said. I mean, that it was not just you isolated in Baltimore. You belong to something that was powerful, and who does not want power? And while she categorized organizations like the Black Panther Party as too militant for her, McCarty maintained that black power offered, quote, a sense of identity, a sense of our culture, a sense of self-worth, a sense of belonging, a sense of respect and dignity for ourselves, end quote. But she also argued that the conditions of her life, need, being sick and tired of people putting you down, and, quote, not being able to get any justice as a low-income black woman, head of household, not only made her more receptive to rights and power claims, but also motivated her and many other low-income women to act. Another example of how low-income black women's activism complicates knowledge of black power. Here it is, just as many of low-income black women operate outside of familiar organizations while incorporating various black power ideologies, harnessing black power iconography. Other low-income black women who harnessed black power broke ranks by refusing to envision or enact their politics in what they viewed as either rigid or exclusionary ways. So Goldie Baker worked with black power proponents, and she advocated empowerment and self-determination. But she maintained that such beliefs supported both black people's rights specifically and social justice broadly. As a result, she insisted upon describing herself as a human being interested in liberation. Quote, if you're fighting for my rights and all the poor people's rights, I'll join you. That does not mean I'm a black nationalist. It means I'm a human being.